Okay, I'm pretty sure the mic is on and working. Okay, hello, my name is Froskurinn. If you don't know who I am, I'm most well known for casting LPL, so the Chinese League of Legends in English, over at twitch.tv/LPLEN. I do it with a group of other casters. It's a good group. We have a lot of fun doing it. We've gotten some pretty decent feedback. It's starting to, grow in popularity, which... If you hadn't guessed, I'm a huge supporter of Chinese League of Legends. I think a major issue, though, especially kind of being in the Western scene and trying to promote an Eastern region, is that there's not a lot of accessibility to the Chinese teams, which is why I'm making this video. I'm literally going to go through each of the Chinese teams, cover their rosters, tell you what they do, what they're bad at, things like that. So there's kind of a cohesive profile set up for each of these Chinese, because a lot of people, they're like, oh, I know Uzi, I know Messiah, I know Tabe, and it's funny because two of those things are not like the other. But here we go. I'm just literally gonna go to TGA. Which one is it? It's this one. I'm gonna go to TGA's website. So this is the official Tencent website. I'm actually on the schedule, so I'm gonna go teams. Okay, so these are the 8 teams that are currently performing in LPL. LPL stands for League of Legends Pro League. No. And I'm just going to go straight down the line and cover every single team. So first one is actually going to be LGD. LGD, I don't know if it stands for anything. It's never been told to me. It's LGD Gaming, though, so I have to assume that the G does not stand for gaming in the middle of that. So LGD, yeah, I can read. Okay, so first of all, start with the bottom lane. It's going to be PYL's their support, and he's also the captain of their team. He's really identifiable if you've ever seen a picture of him. He has this, he's got braces, and it kind of makes his lips puff out. So, pretty talkative guy. He plays a lot of Thresh. He plays a lot of Alistar recently. Leona, like, they're very good at picking engaged supports. You have to understand that China is the region where any support hailed from, so they're not very good at disengaged type of supports like Nami and things like that. They always put their hard engage, their playmaking power on their support role, and a lot of them have shot callers on the support role. I know that FCZF of EDG is also the shot caller for the team. Tabe used to be the shot caller of Royal Club. I'm going to use that example a lot just because I feel like the Western world really recognize him. Sitting with him down in the bot lane is going to be XQ. Now, if you know anything about Chinese League of Legends, you've probably heard of the name STYZ. He was the former AD carry of LGD, and he had a reputation of kind of being, like this god-tier AD carry player. There was a scandal about a few months back where he was trying to switch contracts or break his contract with LGD for an LSPL team because they were going to be offering him more money, which effectively Lace found out, LGD found out, and they benched him. So he no longer plays for the team, and in his replacement, they picked up this guy named XQ. Now, obviously, if you're trying to fill the shoes of a guy who has a reputation of being like god tier, he's the best AD carry. Like, he was really hyped up. I actually feel that XQ did it exceptionally well, but this guy is so young. He's only 15 years old. That's like, all-tech po-belter running around back in the day where they had this reputation of, oh, there's these really good players, but they're so young, which is unfortunate because now Riot has that rule where you have to be 17 to compete on the world stage. So LGD, it's funny because they 2-0'd their opponents last night, so they actually have a chance at the playoff stage, if things line up properly. So there is still a chance, a very small one, that LGD could make Worlds Regionals. But obviously, if they went, they have a player that would not be eligible to play, and he's their star player. He's had fantastic success on Lucian. He has a really smart Jinx. And I think that what makes him exceptionally well, because all of the Chinese players are going to be really adept mechanically, is that you can tell that he is thinking about things, that he is truly the hard carry of his team. In their mid lane, who is brand new this split, his name is Wayless. He is a solo queue assassin player, where they got him from, and he actually chose LGD because he was being offered positions throughout LPL teams. He chose to go to LGD because he thought that PYL as a captain was the better option, so obviously the respect there for your captain, for your support player. Wayless plays a lot of Ahri. That's kind of like the epitome of Wayless. He plays assassin players, he plays roam players. In China, they call it going to hero, and, in the Western world, we call it going to ham. Wayless will dive, like, 2 towers. He's exceptionally well. I think there's a little bit of issues of synergy, particularly with the jungle, which is who we're going to move on to next. It's going to be Chuan right here. The issue with Chuan LGD, the last split, they were kind of they came up really strong, and then they kind of teetered off and they plateaued. When Riven was really powerful, they had a top laner formerly named Star, and he would play, like, only Riven, and they would use an Orianna-Riven combination. They were just, like, decimating through people. They were the first Chinese team to have a Korean coach. They've had a Korean coach for a very long time, and they were just kind of, like, rocking people's worlds. The issue, though, was that when the patch changed and Riven got nerfed, suddenly you just saw LG kind of take a nosedive, which gave them this reputation of being a patch team, and then they completely went through and they gutted the roster, taking out everyone who had a weak champion pool, or at least that's what it seemed like. The issue, though, is that Chuan remained from the previous roster, and as far as weak champion pools are concerned, I feel like this guy has the weakest champion pool and is the weakest link of LGD. He pretty much only plays Lee Sin effectively. He's found recent success on Jarvan and Elise, but, excuse me, sorry, I keep clearing my throat because I am a little bit sick. It's like he needs echolocation to find creeps. And if he's not playing Lee Sin, he just completely forgets how to jungle. It's pretty awkward. So, and every team in LPL, like, pick ban phase has never been considered incredibly strong for China, which I think is kind of their biggest weakness going into the world scene, especially against, like, the Korean pick ban phase, because that's on a completely different level, is, every team recognizes that you cannot let this guy have Lee Sin, which it doesn't sound like it should be a big deal, but it's a big deal in China. Up in the top lane to kind of round out LG's roster is going to be 17, who we have to assume is actually 17, although he also looks very young. He's effectively, he plays meta top laners. I wouldn't say he's the standout star of his team, but, you know, he holds his own, he does well. I feel like the real powerhouses for LGD are, again, their bot lane, PYL, his ability to roam, to make things happen, to be the captain of the team. He's a very intelligent player, plays a really good Thresh, things like that. Has been moving on to Alistar now that Alistar is incredibly strong because the patch just changed. XQ, kind of the all-star, very smart, and Wayless. Chuan and 17, they usually fill out the role of just, you know, being those tanky bruiser line, things like that, and just kind of, you know, surviving their lane. Occasionally they'll win it because they'll face, you know, someone like World Elite Academy or Young Glory, but they're not, you know, the Lord Flames of top lane or anything like that. As far as where LGD stands as a team, they're pretty much middle of the road. They're 5th place right now. They've kind of had this reputation of constantly being middle of the road. I will say that something that's very unique about LGD is they're really good at their map movements. So I talk about how every player in China, they're like little fakers running around. Not Faker's intelligence, but Faker's mechanical ability. Like, if you ask someone, like, oh, show me why Faker is so good, 9 times out of 10, like, people understand, like, they can say, oh, well, he's a god and he's so smart. But when you're like, show me, they'll give you a YouTube clip of Faker doing something like mechanically proficient or something like a Zed play 9 times out of 10. And that's all dandy and all, but I actually think that what makes Faker good is more so that intelligence and how his mechanical ability helps him there. Like, when he was playing R and he, like, flashed over to kill the creep to level up to survive the fight, like, things like that I think are what make Faker a god. So, and that's the one key component that the Chinese players don't have. They have the mechanical ability, but they just haven't bridged that Faker level intelligence. But with LGD, it's almost kind of the opposite. Comparatively to, like, the Chinese context, they're not the most mechanical proficient of the Chinese teams. Still gods, but there are better. But they're really smart, and they make really smart map movements. They're very good at reactionary play, like, oh, if a team's here on the map, we can just create pressure and we can take advantage somewhere else on the map, which is pretty unique to the Chinese teams. Unfortunately, they get beat out in a lot of 5v5s, which, you know, who knows, maybe XQ just needs to come more into its own. I think a big thing is they need to replace their jungle strength, or something needs to happen with Chuan. It needs to give her a break, but that's kind of where LGD stands. So, oops. Moving on, this is Young Glory. Young Glory is IG's sister team. There are 2 sister teams in the league currently, although Young Glory and World Elite Academy, the second sister team, are pretty much guaranteed relegation. Although relegation is changing, LPL is growing, so I'm not quite sure. It's too early to tell whether they're going to stay in LPL or continue on, but we will not see these faces at Worlds, which is kind of a shame, because I feel like Young Glory kind of has the same thing that LGD has, is that they're a very intelligent team. Their picks ban phase, particularly out of all of the LPL teams, I think is rather impressive. They constantly bait picks. Like, they'll leave something, quote-unquote, overpowered open, knowing that they have a counter and an answer to it. And a lot of that power stems from their star player, because normally I want to start with like the support and move up, but I'm going to start with the star player of Young Glory, and it's their mid laner, Diangoon. Diangoon, you have to understand that Young Glory, their sister team again, Invictus Gaming, and if you know anything about Invictus Gaming, their mid laner's name is Zatai, and he is pretty much a god. He plays every single champion, and he plays it incredibly well, and he plays bizarre champions. It's almost like his reputation of just slapping the random button when he gets into a game, and he just like, mid-Renekton, let's go. I got this. But Diangoon is very much kind of the similar thing. He doesn't have as crazy as a champion pool or showing it off, but he definitely is more versatile. You see a lot of, well, previously you saw a lot of utility mages in China, just because, again, it's about bridging that mid-strength onto the 80 carry. They're starting to shift now more to that assassin route, like with Wayless, with Cool, and things like that, but for a while there, it was pretty much like Ziggs, Orianna, you know, you'd have occasionally like the Syndra as far as the assassin goes, because that's a big Chinese pick, but Diangoon is very much, you know, I'm going to play Zed, I'm going to split push, which finding a good split pusher in China is decently hard. Diangoon has a good knowledge of where he needs to be and when. The issue with his team, though, is his bottom lane. So Yancer is the captain of the team. He's a Thresh Blitzcrank main, so he's really good with those hook champions. And again, he plays a lot of hard engage supports. Good player. I definitely think he's a strong point. Their weakest link is actually their AD carry, which is very unique for a Chinese team. The fact that it's almost, I don't want to compare them to LMQ, although I think it's important because LMQ, it's funny because everyone calls them a Chinese team in North America, but the fact that their strongest player is their mid laner is like very anti-Chinese. That's kind of unique in a sense. Not that Vasili's not incredibly potent, but you know, everyone recognizes Xiao Wei Xiao. Diangoon, obviously the strongest player of Young Glory. Their weakest player is going to be their AD carry, Jinlong, from Dragon Ball Z, the dragon. And so the running joke is, oh, he definitely needs to find his Dragon Balls and level up because something is just not going correct for him. I don't know what else really to say. He's not mechanically proficient. When they try to play things like protect the Kog'Maw composition and they give him power is when they lose. When they win is when they're incredibly unique and creative with their picks bans, and they allow Diangoon to get an assassin, particularly Zed they find a lot of success on, and have him play the map pressure game and find picks. They're very good at playing the map as opposed to the traditional Chinese meta of 5v5. In the jungle, it's going to be Yinfu, so Yancer support, Yinfu in the jungle. Yinfu is actually really smart. I would think that he's kind of the secondary carry. It's almost like the jungle, the support, and the mid laner for Young Glory are kind of the carries. Plays a lot of Jarvan, things like that. Nothing like too stand out, but he's always where he needs to be. And he's very good at creating kind of the AoE tank line, aggressive jungler, and obviously you have to be, he's always there for the counter gank, and he plays to Diangoon's strength. So it's a jungler that recognizes, hey, my mid laner will make plays, I just need to be around him either for the counter gank or for camping his lane, and things will get off the ground. Their top laner is going to be number 1. Despite being called number 1, he is pretty much number 2. Again, he kind of almost fills the same role that LGD's top laner 17 does, although 17 is just a better player. In the 1v1, 17 is going to win that. But again, it's playing things like what's in meta, Maokai, Gragas, Tribana. There's nothing truly stand out there. Again, it's kind of that AoE tank line. So, moving on, EDG. EDG is currently ranked, I believe, 3rd place because they got 2-0'd by Starhorn Royal Club last night. EDG has the reputation of being kind of the Chinese all-stars, or at least they had the reputation of being that. So back when World League, because World League was kind of the, you know, it's the big team in China. You want to talk about like, you know, TSM, that's World League. They are the TSM of China, except it's like 10 times worse. Like their fans are rabid. They're 100% supported on fan donations. So just think about that. Like a professional team is 100%, they just live off of fan donations, and they get enough of them that they can easily self-sustain. They're a very popular team in China. EDG was created, World Elite was having roster issues over their management. There was a bunch of internal turmoil and drama, and EDG offered their support, FCZF and their jungler Clearlove, contracts to come and leave World Elite and join this new team called Edward Gaming. So they took it, and because of that, there's huge animosity between EDG and World Elite. There was even a point where EDG, when they were streaming, they were advised not to speak when they were streaming because the the fan base for World Elite would use, like, if Name was streaming and he would say something in solo queue, like, if he was playing a game, he'd say, oh, this guy isn't very good, oh, this guy sucks. He immediately would blow, oh, toxic player, Name, like, all this trash talk, so they just couldn't do it. They just had to be silent. They were called traitors. They get things like death threats from the fans. It's, like, crazy. Like, the animosity between World Elite and EDG cannot be underlined more. That said, it's almost like an all-star roster. I know people will be like, oh, you know, Uzi is the best because they 2-0'd EDG. I still frankly believe that Name is the best AD carry in China, which might, well, it definitely puts him in context of one of the best AD carries in the world, up there with, like, Imp and Deft, like, that level. And the reason why I believe that Name is better or stronger than Uzi, don't get me wrong, Uzi is incredibly proficient mechanically, and of course this is Starhorn Royal Club's AD carry. We saw him at the world stage. I know that the casters like to call him Uzi. The reason why we call him Uzi is because he has specifically said he prefers to be called Uzi. It's an acronym, which is why we call it FCZF instead of FZF. It's FCZF. They're acronyms. They stand for things. But Name is incredibly intelligent. Like, you can tell that this guy is thinking when you watch him play, which I feel like a lot of AD carries, Uzi in particular, they're almost like the counter opposite. Like, when you watch Uzi, it's like, there's some thought process going there, but it's very much like a weapon. I think Thorn used the description of Doublelift, how he's like a cannon. You have to prep him and you have to control him, but you just kind of point him in a direction and you just let him go. That's very much Uzi. He's a huge weapon and a very good threat because of his mechanical proficiency in his champion pool, but you have to control him and you have to lead him, which makes him so potent because he's now teamed up with Zero. Name is much more self-sufficient in his intelligence. He'll constantly be sidestepping things, and he doesn't need to rely on self-sufficient champions with their mobility like Tristana and Lucian. He can do this on things like Kog'Maw and Jinx, champions that are very immobile. You'll see him constantly dodge, like, Gragas casks and sidestep. I am completely of the belief that because EDG are kind of on a downward spiral of depression, if he makes Worlds, which I believe he should, but unfortunately they're not having the greatest end split, that he will never be touched, because he's so used to, everything's about the AD carry in China, like, everyone's about, you know, using every single ability, timing it perfectly, diving that back line, that no one in NA and E are going to be able to touch him, because he's just so used to dodging and moving around. So that's my 2 cents on Name. If you haven't watched him, even a game that EDG loses and loses poorly, just watch how Name moves around the team fight. It's really something special. The thing that is a drawback to him is he's very cocky and he's a very arrogant player. The reason why he came to power is Wei Xiao, the godfather of the World Elite Academy AD carry. You know, back in the heyday of World Elite where they were like the #1 team in the world, he said, you know, I can be better than that guy. I can beat Wei Xiao. And so that's the reputation that Name is coming from, to rise up and to now be this big powerhouse. Joining him in the bot lane, of course, is going to be the former World Elite support, FCZF, the shot caller of EDG. He played a lot of Morgana back in Spring Split. Now it's kind of, you know, mixed results. I won't say he's the strongest support, but he definitely has a good eye of when to start fights, and he's a very intelligent player, obviously being the shot caller of the team. He's adept at communication, although I hear that FCZF's the primary shot caller, and then Clearlove is the secondary shot caller, and EDG has a set of problems all their own. In the mid lane, it's going to be U, or Little U. It stands for Unstoppable. He plays pretty much primarily Orianna and Ziggs. He has said that he likes to play assassin players, but EDG uses him as a crutch. And it's unfortunate because I feel like, not in the recent weeks, but previously, Yu was kind of really the spine or the backbone of EDG. Where if Name never really, because everyone's like, oh, who's the star of EDG? It's going to be Name, because he just has that reputation of being that big powerhouse AD carry. But Yu typically, although the Starhorn Royal Club games, again, were completely off for the team, typically was the backbone of the team. He was the most consistent player. He was the guy who made things, who got things done in the team fights because he would play Ziggs. Like, you just cannot give him Ziggs. He should not be allowed on that champion because he will diggity dumpster over everyone. So the issue, though, is that he doesn't roam, and he plays one style. So that is starting to be an emerging weakness of EDG. The bigger weakness is going to be their jungler, Clearlove. And you have to understand that Clearlove started jungling under Messiah. And if you remember Messiah from World Elite, he was a big Twisted Fate player. And so you have a mid laner who you are effectively, you know, learning your jungle career under, who is known for applying map pressure. Messiah wasn't known for being able to, like, 1v1 his lanes. He wasn't like, you know, like a Dottie, like, I'm just gonna come through and steamroll through. He was known for creating presence on the map and winning everyone else's lanes. And he kind of pioneered the way to play Twisted Fate. So because of that, Clearlove is a very farm-heavy jungler. He doesn't really gank. He doesn't... excuse me, that was gross. Gotta take some water. Oh man, if it sounded gross, you should have tasted it. That was disgusting. No, okay, so Clearlove doesn't gank. Like, that's kind of the short end all of it. He just doesn't. He's seen success on Rengar, and he's seen success on Jarvan, surprisingly. But the issue, though, is that he has the highest kill participation of any player on any team. He has a 77% kill participation for EDG, which is the highest in LPL. So it says something about EDG that when Clearlove is on, they are on, and when he is off, they are completely off. But a big issue, though, is kind of like his playstyle and overcoming that. In the top lane, it's going to be Koro. Koro, I feel like a lot of people really overlook him. He's kind of the epitome of the Chinese top lane. His understanding about space, though, and even in the Starhorn Royal Club game where they played poorly and they lost both sets, Koro was incredibly on point. He understands space. He understands how to create room for his carries to grow. He understands when he needs to pull back. And I would say if you wanted to be an efficient tank, if you wanted to be a good, not like a carry top laner, but like a good team fight top laner, Koro is probably the best top laner to look at in... I can't say the word because there are really good top laners in Korea, but again, it's mostly the standout ones are kind of that carry potential. Definitely in China. So that's something to watch. Plays a lot of Shyvana, Mundo, Trundle, things like that. Maokai, of course, now that it's popular Gragas, so that's kind of his stick, except he does it incredibly well. His Trundle pillars in particular, his Trundle is fantastic, amazing. It was undefeated for a very long time. That finally came to a close. But that's EDG, so reputation, rivalries of World League, but they are also rivalries of the next team, which is Invictus Gaming. The idea with EDG is the formation of the team is I don't care who you always have to beat IG. And this actually finally broke at the very beginning of the summer split. Formerly EDG had like a 7-0 record over IG just historically, but finally IG split, and that's kind of the stick of IG is that they never get 2-0'd. They always split. They will never 2-0. It's pretty unfortunate. The only team that they've 2-0'd in LPL is their sister team, Young Glory. Everyone else, including the last place and first place teams, they have gone 1-1. Inconsistency is the biggest issue. If you don't know anything about League or Chinese League of Legends, chances are you've heard the name PDD. He showed at, I believe it was All-Stars when he faced off against Stanley Top. Like, there was a lot of, greats in that tournament, but PDD was there. He played on teams like eHome, things like that. He's been around the scene, kind of like I would almost put him up there with Mistake, Messiah, kind of godfathers of the scene, who really kind of identified and created a very unique way to play League of Legends. He was the former top laner of IG. He retired this year, which is funny because he always joked about retirement, but he never went through with it, and finally he does. He retired for health reasons, to do with his hands. So he couldn't play anymore. He was replaced by Young-Soo, who is a Korean. We talk about kind of the Korean invasion coming over into China. So this is the first time that I'll introduce you to one of the Korean players. It is Young-Soo now in the top lane, and it's a very different style. And the issue with IG that I think is important to underline is the fact that PDD was their shot caller, and they had, even when PDD was their last split, so it was spring split, they had issues where IG they came out of the gate and they were super shaky and they kind of crashed and burned, and then at the very end they snuck by into playoffs, and then they of course finished second, which means that they have an invitation to the World's qualifiers. So IG could still very well represent China at Worlds despite their lackluster performance this split. The issue is that they lost their shot caller, and PDD was now becoming the shot caller and captain of the team. PDD then retires after, he has that stretch of practice. And Zatai, their mid laner, is now the new shot caller. So I feel like either Invictus Gaming is the most brilliant team at experimenting with their split because they already have a World's Invitation qualifier, or qualifier invitation, or they're have no idea what they're doing, and Zitai is just trying to, like, fish out of water, find how to shot call this team. But Youngsu's the replacement. PDD was very much a Zion Spartan, Lord Flame-esque, hard carry. The Hurricane Kale, that's where it came from. He is the guy who pioneered that, the damage build Renekton. I don't mean like a team, I mean like a Bloodthirster. Like, this guy would build Bloodthirster on Renekton and just go to town up in the top lane. Youngsu, first person to play Gragas top in China. Pretty much exclusively his champion, plays Shyvana, things like that. So different setup. He started to get better. He started out really shaky, but he's starting to find his own. I know that he speaks Mandarin, so it's not an issue of communication. He was picked up because he's fluent in Mandarin. He's also best friends with Zitai. Which I guess I'll just go straight into the mid lane now. Zitai comes from this this dynasty almost. You have to think of the mid laners in China. Messiah, that name's going to come up a lot. Messiah, Whites, and Cool were kind of the top 3 mid laners in China. Cool, of course, well known that he beat Faker when he was in his prime in the 1v1. He took games off Faker, I think is the correct way to phrase that. Has recently come back. Is starting to come back up to his prime, but not quite there yet, at least not in my opinion. Zitai was considered the 4th best, so it was, you know, Cool, Whites, Messiah, Zitai. And it was kind of agreed that Cool went on entry list, was benched for Xiong, which we saw him perform with OMG at All-Stars. Whites retires, and Messiah retires. So it was kind of like these 3 powerhouses were suddenly out of the game, which left Zitai to rise up to his dynasty to be the standout mid laner. And he kind of fumbled. I don't know if he choked or what it was, but he just couldn't really find his groove. This has started to really change recently. When he plays things like Zed, that is a Faker in his prime level Zed. When he plays things like Yasuo, that is a Dade level Yasuo. Like, he's incredibly proficient at these champions, and I feel like when IG plays real champions as opposed to some of the random bullshit that they've been playing, they do much better. Which is why I'm kind of on the fence of, are they experimenting with picks or what is it? He was the first person to bring out the Zilean mid, so that's where it came from. Of course, Faker won with it, whereas I think IG hasn't won with it yet. They've played it 3 times, but the idea with it is that you immediately get level 6 on Zilean, you push out your wave, and you run down and you dive a tower because you're utilizing Chrono Shift. But Zitai was the first person to pull that out. He's played things like Lux, he's had that banned against him, he's played things like Renekton mid in the very first set, the opening game of LPL against his sister team, Young Glory. So that was kind of curious. They won with it. In the jungle, it's going to be Illusion. So Illusion is a Skarner player, or he found a lot of success on Skarner. He's almost the inverse of Clearlove. So it's where Clearlove doesn't gank early, but Clearlove does well in the 5v5's team fight phase. Excuse me. Illusion ganks non-stop, but he kind of falls off in the 5v5. It started to get a little bit better, but he plays like very dive-heavy champions, very mobility-based champions, so like Lee Sin, Skarner, Jarvan, things like that. Hasn't found a lot of success on Rengar, but I think that speaks more to the team as opposed to his ability as a jungler to play it. And then the bot lane is going to be Kid, the AD carry, and Kitties, the support. Kitties is a Thresh player. You cannot let this guy have Thresh. It's pretty much picked away from him or banned against him every single time. Thresh is kind of like the big factor for China. I know that when Starhorn Royal Club had their previous roster, I believe this is when they were still Royal Club, Kitties 1v1'd Uzi, Thresh versus Vayne, and pretty much monstered him both times, so that was pretty cute. But that's kind of like the threat. Like, this is Uzi, he's on Vayne, this is his big champion, it's his big breakout, and Kitty just kind of, like, both sets, I'll never forget that, bested him every single time, and just, like, straight up 1v1s and pushes Uzi out, and IG wins the game. But Kid is a Trinity Force user, which is, I say that, but if you actually look at his picks for LPL so far, it's been a lot of Twitch, it's been a lot of Tristana, things like that, Kog'Maw even, although I don't think he's found the same amount of success on Kog'Maw that other AD carries have, but he's well known for Ezreal. Like, that's kind of his big thing, is he's a really good Ezreal player, good Corki player, things like that. I feel like Kid is actually having the split of his life. Like, if you actually watch how he positions in team fights, he is definitely one of the top AD carries of China. Although, you know, a little bit further down, people are typically, like, the top three in no particular order. I'll even say Uzi first. Uzi, Name, Wei Xiao. But Kid can compete up there. And it's unfortunate that he's having such a good split with his team fighting presence. He's not known as a lane winning AD carry. I'll just get that right out of the way. He doesn't do hyper-aggressive in lane. Like, Uzi and Name are kind of like the two quintessential, we're going to 2v2 you no matter even if it's a losing matchup because we know that we can beat you. Kid is not like that. He'll take the lane swap, no problem. He kind of struggles through lane phase, but his team fight presence is pretty out of control, especially this specific split. His positioning has been pretty on point. So it's just unfortunate that his team, for whatever reason, is having shot calling issues or they don't have an, they do have an analyst, excuse me, they do not have a coach. So some infrastructure issues going on with IIG. But the only consistent thing about IIG is that they will forever be inconsistent. So if IG ever played, like, oh, who won the IIG games? You can just already, 99% they split. Moving on to Starhorn Royal Club, probably the most recognizable team to the Western audience. They are not Royal Club, it is Starhorn Royal Club. LOL Esports, looking at you. Okay, I guess I'll just start with Uzi, the AD carry, since he's kind of the most well-known player. Do not ever get me wrong. I feel like I'm really hard on Uzi. I'm not trying to be like, oh, Uzi sucks, you know, Nami's so much. That's not ever my intention. I just feel like there's a bit of a misconception about where the strength of Starhorn Royal Club really lies. Uzi is a big part of that. Again, he is a huge weapon, and if you can utilize him correctly, he can go god tier. His showing against EDG was pretty much the best positioning I've ever seen from him. For once he didn't, you know, flash into 5 people and immediately die. Like, he used to constantly pull, like, double lifts. And I think they're kind of very similar in that respect, that regard. At previous Worlds, he was known as a Caitlyn player. Even though Caitlyn kind of came back into favor with the item changes, of course Tristana Kog'Maw still being kind of the go-to, he hasn't really fallen back on her. He's seen a lot of Lucian, and he's seen a lot of Corki play, and his Corki looks really, really good. My issue with Uzi, and I wish you could see my hand, because there's a trajectory. So Royal Club takes second at Worlds. They completely lose their powerhouses on their roster. They lose Whites and they lose Tabe. Immediately, they nosedive. We're getting trashed all over the place. We're considered a good team, very low, middle of the pack team. They didn't have a good roster. They had probably the worst support of LPL. Bao took over for Tabe's place, and you should just look up, like, Uzi did not look happy. It was just a complete disaster and a complete mess, which is funny now because they're on their rise back up to attending Worlds and representing China at Worlds, and the fact that, oh, I feel like there's going to be a big assumption that they've been this strong team in China ever since, but I cannot, that is not what happened. So Royal Club, they took second, and then just everything went wrong. The roster was just a disaster. They couldn't find anyone's, and they finally now, on the back end of the split, started to bring it back together right before Worlds. So it's kind of like a true comeback story. And here's why I don't give all of their success to Uzi. The fact of the matter is that Uzi was on their roster. He was the only consistent part of their roster when Royal Club was pretty much like in the shitter and kind of flailing around of what to do and get back to it. Of course, they revamped the roster. They kept Uzi because his potential is incredible, but he needs facilitators and he needs people to control him to be effective. So they bring in their new support, the Korean influx, Zero, formerly from the KT organization, as well as INSEC, also from the KT organization. Of course, INSEC much more famous than Zero. Zero is by far, hands down, the best support in LPL right now. You know, if you want to be like, oh, Korean supports are better than China, whatever. He's amazing. Mechanically intelligent. He's the perfect combination to Uzi, and I will say that as far as the 2v2 bot lane, as the meta shifts away from a lane swap to a 2v2 and more traditional lanes, this very much favors Starhorn Royal Club because that 2v2 is devastating. Uzi is incredibly aggressive, and Zero has just enough like sway with him and control that it's out of control. If you are not an aggressive bot lane and you face off against Uzi and Zero, you're about to get shit stomped. It's pretty real. The other big thing, of course, is going to be INSEC, although I'm not going to give... It's not all Uzi INSEC, which is where it was now coming from. I know in interviews it was kind of like Uzi had the sigh of relief where he said, you know, finally I don't have to be the hard carry of my team. I can rely on other people pick up the slack, and he was referring to, this is right when Insect joined the team. Insect kind of floundered at the beginning of the split, to be honest. He couldn't find a good rhythm. He was a very aggressive jungler, and here's the thing, like, why I think Starhorn Royal Club, it's really starting to work out with them, is that the team has finally, like, if you think about Insect when he performed on KT, kind of at their height, he was very much the playmaker. He goes ham, he goes really hard on the paint, he'll invade at bizarre times, and at the beginning of the LPL split, he was getting punished for that, but now it's kind of to the point where if Insect goes in and it's like this crazy play, Starhorn Royal Club, instead of watching him, everyone will follow. They'll all go ham. And so it's a very aggressive team and a very explosive team when they get their team fights going. But what's really unique about it, and what kind of echoes past Royal Club at Worlds, is that they don't fight for no reason. Like, a lot of Chinese teams, it almost becomes deathmatch. Well, they're just kind of like pounding, like Invictus Gaming. Like, this is classic Invictus Gaming, is they will fight over anything, and they will fight no matter what. And people will look at Starhorn Royal Club and IG and be like, oh, they're both really early aggressive teams. But the difference is that Starhorn Royal Club, and why Starhorn is higher on the rankings, I believe they're actually tied for first, although OMG played last night and they split 1-1, so I think OMG retook the lead by 1 point, is that Starhorn fight for objectives. They will not fight for no reason, and you can tell that there's an intelligence behind it that says that's very methodical, that okay, Dragon's going to spawn here, so we're going to pick a fight at bot lane here, and then we're going to transition this to the global objective. So that's the big difference, and that's why Starhorn is performing so well right now. Cola and Korn, they're two new solo laners, the two new all-star solo laners. So at the very beginning of the split, I gave Cola and Korn a really hard time, because effectively they didn't do anything. Like, they had the least amount of kill participation for their teams. There's no, like, responsibility there. It was kind of like a wish-wash, and it was kind of, if Uzi Eye and Insect didn't take off, Starhorn just kind of floundered out, and they looked like a very mediocre team. Like, they had a lot of mechanical proficiency, especially for China, and so they could kind of brute force victories. But as far as like a whole and a cohesive unit, they just did not look up to par, like EDG, like World Elite at the time, or like OMG. This has completely changed as they've shifted their gold focus. So a big issue is that Uzi Eye has tons of gold on Starhorn Royal Club. Like, his kill participation and how much of their power that they put on him was immense. Like, I think it was like on average, if Uzi Eye died 5 times, so every 5 deaths, Starhorn Royal Club would lose 40% of their gold. Like, that's how much gold was being put on this this AD carry. Now that they've started to spread that out, and they gave Korn responsibility, and he's a big assassin player, particularly Fizz, it gets banned against him, night and day. Like, the OMG versus Starhorn Royal Club, everyone should watch that. Or, excuse me, was it OMG? Yes, it was OMG. Versus Starhorn Royal Club. I think I previously said EDG. Oh well. No, it was EDG. I'm crazy. It was EDG versus Starhorn Royal Club because it was the 2 second place teams. I remember now. Rengar versus Clear Love, and that's where all of that went wrong. If you haven't watched that set, that is the set to watch. The only reason Rengar worked in that case is because he was against Clear Love, but I feel like that in itself was incredibly intelligent for Starhorn to recognize. But they give responsibility to Korn, and Korn finally steps up, and it's night and day. And it wasn't a team playing poorly. Both teams played well, but Starhorn played it better. And I have no problem supporting Starhorn Royal Club at Worlds if they continue to play how they did in that set, because I feel like they are a legitimate threat right now. So that's my spiel on them. Korn is, he's a bit of a different shift from the AoE bruiser tank line. He's much more about the carry, Jax, things like that. Of course, Gragas, the big one, but he's very much, you have to come up and you have to deal with me. I'm going to beat you in the 1v1, which is why, again, this meta shift of going to back to the traditional lanes, it's almost like a double whammy combo for Starhorn Royal Club. If you think in context of EDG, yes, their 2v2 Name and FZZF is strong, so going back to the 2v2 versus 2v2 is fine for them. But Koro isn't well known for his 1v1 presence. He kind of survives lanes and he becomes a huge team fight asset. Starhorn Royal Club, completely opposite. They have kind of that double threat of not only do we have this fantastic, amazing 2v2 bot lane, but we have a top laner who is very much Zion Spartan-esque. So I think that really favors them. Next team is going to be World Elite. what to say about World Elite. They were doing so well, and then they went on this downward spiral. They won IM, and then it just all turned to shit. They had a weekend, which it was pretty much a super week. Like, China LPL doesn't have super weeks, but World Elite kind of got slammed with a super week. They had 3 games in 1 weekend, and I think the issue was they just did not properly prep. They went on tilt, and they lost a huge amount of points. I think they went 1-5 out of that entire split, or that entire set, so that was pretty disappointing, and it kind of started the downward spiral of World Elite. Talk about Korean influx. So they have Axine in the jungler, now known as Sen, and they also have Ninja in the mid lane. So in China, they're known as Bear and Rabbit, I guess is what the fans, and you talk about how this is the TSM of China. This is the most popular team there is. They actually had a "please stop sending us plushies" letter. Like, Ninja, and here's, don't get this conception wrong. The Korean players in China are incredibly popular. People love them. I know some sites are saying that there's animosity between the Chinese, Korean. No, that's completely bullshit. Literally, like, Ninja and Bear, or Rabbit and Bear, their nicknames were given to them by the Chinese fans. They kept sending them plushies of bears and rabbits, and they had to be told, like, please, fans, stop sending it. We ran out of space. Thank you so much. We support you. EDG's mid laner Yu, I guess, posted on his Weibo, it's the Chinese Twitter, how he was playing, like, or he liked a cell phone game or something, and it was called, I think, Kill Ninja. And the fans took that to be, like, a threat on their mid laner, their Korean mid laner, and, like, started sending him and his girlfriend death threats. So, like, do not misconstrue that. The Korean players are adored in China. World Elite has a very specific formula on how they win their games. They're currently, I think, 4th or 5th. I'll have to look at the standings. They were doing really well, and then again, they just went on that downward spiral in that 1 weekend. They put Ninja on Lulu. You cannot give him that champion, although he's found a pentakill on Jace, I believe, so that's, whatever. He started to go more like Jace, Seraph, Twisted Fate, but before it was primarily Lulu. You put him on a utility-based mid, and he transfers all of his power and his strength onto Wei Xiao. Wei Xiao, of course, the godfather of 80 carries, the big 80 carry of World Elite, probably I'm not going to say he's the most famous player in China, or in the world. That's definitely Sao Mei, but he's definitely up there. When Wei Xiao and Sao Mei are introduced, the crowd goes wild, and it's not Xiao Mei, it's Sao Mei. I believe it means strawberry. So Wei Xiao, the reason why he's the godfather of 80 carry, and it's literally as basic as this, and this is how long this guy's been around. Wei Xiao was the pioneer of the idea, and I'll use Ezreal as an example, of instead of Eing, so Ezreal's, Essence, it's not Essence Flux, his dash, his escape, instead of Eing into a fight, Wei Xiao pioneered the idea of saving it and using it as an escape. So that playstyle of never being aggressive with your escape and being conservative about it. That's literally what people mean when they call him the godfather of the 80 carry. That idea was completely foreign to anyone. And Doublelift specifically, as a North American player, has been very public in his interviews talking about how when he was learning to 80 carry, he looked at Wei Xiao a lot for pointers and what to do. So that's the history of Wei Xiao. He's found a lot of success on Corki. I believe he has the only 2 pentakills that have happened in LPL have both been on World Elite, and again, it was Ninja's Jace and Wei Xiao's Corki. And for a good while there, because World Elite was just on this huge hot streak that they looked unstoppable. Now, Wei Xiao is the shot caller for their team, and comparatively to other LPL teams, World Elite has a very different playstyle. So we talk about how, like, quote-unquote, Chinese aggression. Put me on the desk, right? I can say Chinese aggression all the time. No. Team deathmatch, fighting a lot, early aggression, grouping up. World Elite is almost opposite of that. They slow the pace of the game down, and they control it. And the reason why is because Wei Xiao is the shot caller. And it's effectively this mentality of, I need to farm up, I need to get my items, I'm playing a hyper carry because that's the formula of how we win. Lulu mid, hyper carry 80 carry, put all of the strength onto Wei Xiao, protect the 80 carry composition. And what you'll see is they'll ward everything out. They'll take a lane swap. They'll make sure that Wei Xiao gets a 1v1, so he gets solo farm and solo EXP against the top laner. And they'll just kind of stall the game out until 30 minutes. Like, it'll be a super low kill death game until Wei Xiao finally says, you know, I'm ready, and then it just explodes. The other issue is Conan, his support player, is not very good. He plays a really good Leona, and the strength of World Elite, and I think what also speaks to kind of World Elite's downward spiral is they don't fare very well in the 2v2 meta. Not that Wei Xiao isn't good, he's very, very good. One of the top AD carries in the world, he always will be. But the issue is Conan. Conan is not mechanically proficient enough to be strong enough in that 2v2 lane. And so their success, again, it's a super specific formula that you will see World Elite do every single time to win games. Lulu mid, 2v1 lane swap, Wei Xiao gets left alone in the lane for solo farm and EXP, and they kick Conan out of the lane with the jungler, and they have him roam around on Leona. Because again, he doesn't fare well in the laning phase, but he fares well in the team fight phase. With the meta shifting back to traditional lanes, this again is kind of a direct hit and a very hard hit to World Elite's playstyle. So that's a big issue there. As far as kind of the rest of their team, it's going to be, I already talked about Axion. I actually think Axion is probably the most underrated jungler in China right now. He's very smart, Korean jungler, of course. He's very smart about wording. He played a lot of Kha'Zix, Rengar, Lee Sin, Jarvan, things like that. Never was much on the Skarner hype train. That was mostly illusion. But what really separates him is his warding. He's very good at, you know, invading at the proper times, laying down wards, and then leaving, and then utilizing those wards later to make informed decisions about, you know, if we're not fighting because Wei Xiao is not ready to fight, everyone will clear out of that area. And it's that wording and that jungle style that really helped World Elite stall out games to when they wanted to fight them. So I definitely credit Axion a lot with that. The reason why, and it's a bit of controversy because their former mid laner Sukum is actually really good, and I would say probably better than Ninja. The reason why they brought on 2 Korean players as opposed to just one is it comes down to, I think Kelsey Moser said it best, the puppy analogy. So if you get a puppy and you like go out to work and you leave the puppy alone, it gets sad. So everyone says that, oh, you get 2 puppies so they can keep each other company and they can communicate with each other. It's kind of the mentality with the Korean players. Like, I shit you not. It's because they don't speak Chinese. So the only Korean player that speaks Mandarin is Youngsu. So Axion and Ninja, there's obvious communication problems with the team. Like in Star Farm Royal Club, Insec and Zero are being taught Mandarin. Like, they have teachers in the gaming house with them, teaching them to speak and communicate with the team. But right now they communicate in English with the team. I assume the same thing is going on with the Korean members of World Elite, although they've been less public about what's going on behind the scenes. But it's so that the jungler and the mid laner can communicate together. It's by no coincidence that the two roles that have the most influence and impact with each other and will be working with each other the most are able to speak the same language. So that is why Sukum is not in that mid lane. And then Ruo was kicked from the team because I guess he just didn't feel like playing anymore. He wasn't practicing enough. So in the top lane, though, to finish it off, it's going to be Xiaomei. The most popular player in the world. Like, if you looked at his all-star votes, it was ridiculous. Obviously, this is because China has the most people in the world, but this guy, he's known as an incredibly nice guy on stream. The reason why he has such a good reputation is he'll actually add random people. So this is a challenger level, you know, highest player. I'm trying to think of, like, in NA what he would equate to. Bjergsen? I don't know, like Bjergsen level player, and he's streaming, and he talks while he streams, he teaches while he streams, just kind of in his solo queue, like it's almost like a Skara-esque. He'll take random ads, and people will ask him questions on stream, and he'll take time out of his day and he'll answer them. So that's his reputation, and that's why he's so popular and he's so loved. He's generally an amazing and very nice guy. Little known fact, his dad actually died at All-Stars. Xiaomei played, but that's why he looked so upset. Like, the fact that, you know, something like that happened to him, and then he continued and he played the game anyway. So that's the history of Xiaomei. And for a while there, at the beginning of the split, I kept saying, you know, he is the best top laner in China right now, because he really was. He understood how to utilize teleport, and he understood how to utilize map pressure, which, again, is completely foreign to Chinese. They started to get better at it, but for a while there, it was much more about grouping, finding the 5v5, and the reason why the Chinese group up, it's why is there that meta of aggression? Why are the Chinese teams so aggressive? The reason being is because so much of their power is centralized on the AD carry. So they need to get that guy involved with as much as possible, as soon as possible. So that's why the Chinese group up so early, and they find those 5v5s, and they have that reputation of being an aggressive team. So there's World Elite. They had a good shot at going to Worlds. Technically, the dream is still alive, but it's looking far more grim now. Though with EDG kind of spiraling out of control, it's kind of up in the air. I feel like definitively right now, from when this video is made, it's going to be OMG, Starhorn, Royal Club. Most people would then have said EDG or World Elite, but, you know, it could be IG, it could be WE, it could be EDG, so kind of up in the air on that one. Okay, OMG. Definitely the most recent team that the Western world has seen. Let's get one thing out of the way, just out of the gate, because I feel like everyone's like, oh, well, Fnatic beat OMG, and Cloud9 beat OMG, and how do you explain that? This is supposed to be the best team in China. Okay, they were playing with a sub. Like, Cloud9 beat OMG with a sub. They had poor High, his lung collapse. That was awful. I actually really love High, so I'm not even gonna try to make fun of him, because I think he's like I think he would make an amazing coach, just straight off the bat. But I will say that I think Link is the better mid laner, but, you know, whatever. It's a shot caller, big important role to lose. OMG was also playing with a sub. Like, flat out, that's the most obvious thing. Xiang, excuse me. The mid laner that OMG appeared with was literally a top challenger player known for his Syndra play and his LeBlanc play. And he was taking the spot of Cool, who was on the injury list because of his eyes, and Cool is the mid laner that took games off of Faker in his prime. So a very well-established mid laner. I think the Koreans think very highly of him. I know Monte Cristo thinks very highly of him. So just straight out the gate, Xiang was a sub. That was not the mid laner that you will see at Worlds when OMG makes it. And the difference is night and day. Xiang came to power in the 4VO meta. It first appeared in China, which is why I was very confused that the desk seemed to think that China had no idea how to deal with a 4VO meta at All-Stars, because completely false. They are so used to dealing with that. And so you have to think, if you pick up a challenger player, so again, that solo queue mentality versus the 5v5 mentality, and he happens to start playing for a team in a 4VO meta that effectively isolates the mid lane into a true 1v1, and he's known as a Syndra and LeBlanc player when both these champions were ridiculously overpowered in the context of mid lane, like, his success rate skyrocketed. But it was under very specific circumstances that was able to happen, and in All-Stars, that completely gets removed because he's playing against effectively Bengi didn't even have to get successful ganks off on Xiang. All he had to do was apply pressure, and the fact of the matter is that player had no idea how to deal with a jungler. Like, that's as basic as it was, and that is what happened at All-Stars. Do I think that even if I don't know, actually, thinking about that, if it had been Cool and if it had been Allen, if it was the current roster, if things would have changed? Because obviously, like, I always want to call them SK, but then the European fans are like, what, Candy Panda? No, if SKT1, that's hard for me to say. I am not of the opinion that, you know, China is going to go to Worlds and beat Korea at all. But that's not why you should watch Chinese League of Legends. People missed the rise of power. Like, let me get that out. There is no way that China is going to take first at Worlds. China will take second. I will stand by that. And, you know, if EU or NA or Mineski show up and call me wrong, you can totally, like, slam for, oh, this bitch said that China was out and that she got. Go ahead. I will put my money where my mouth is. China is going to steamroll everyone into second place. They will not steamroll the Koreans. That's not going to happen. The Koreans have too many things going for them. Will they be able to take games off the Koreans? Right now, I believe so. Will they be able to win? No, not at all. So that's out of the way. But I hate it when people use the All-Stars performance as criticism to China. And I hate it when people use the IEM performance as criticism as well, because China was back like 3 patches when they showed up at IEM, which has not happened. China is now live competitively on 4.12. In their solo queue on the general client, they are for once on the same patch as the rest of the world, 4.13. So that's a historic moment alone. But their new mid laner is cool. He is not quite back up to form where he used to be, but he is performing very well. And I feel like ONG, they started to slide a little bit in the back half of the split, but I feel like they're actually kind of experimenting and trying out different picks. My theory is, and of course this is Kelsey Moser's theory as well, is that Cool is actually a really good RE player. And I know that he has a challenger account on the Korean server. So don't get me wrong, the Chinese, they play with the Koreans a lot. It's not like it's completely isolated. They've scrimmed with Koreans. They play on the Korean servers. There is a lot more interaction than people would believe. He's been playing a lot of Ahri, and I kind of feel that he's almost like hiding it, and he's gonna bring it out at Worlds, but we'll see. He's very well known as an Ahri player, and of course Ahri just got those buffs, so expect to see that. But cool, mechanically proficient, incredibly intelligent, huge champion pool. This is an all-star, world-class mid laner. So there's that first and foremost. The jungler is going to be Drug, formerly Alan, formerly Loveland. Same guy. He pioneered, what he's probably most famous for is he pioneered the aggressive Elise strategy. I don't know if you guys remember way back when, but it used to be kind of the cool, hip thing to do is you would play Elise and you would just run into the enemy jungler and you would just kill that guy on his red buff. He was the guy who pioneered that. Bingy has credited him a lot as kind of helping identify the jungle style when, you know, Bingy was doing better than he has recently. So far, his return to the jungle, because at All-Stars, at IEM, it was Pomelo in the jungle, and Alan, formerly Loveland, was actually playing support. He prefers to play jungle. He does not want to play support, but they were trying to cater to the roster that they had at the time. People thought that when he returned to jungle, it was like, well, if Loveland can get back up to form and Cool can get back up to form, OMG will be another world-class team and will be a serious threat. And people were trying to throw bans early, like banning out all the random junglers and just seeing, you know, can this guy even still do it? His jungle pool is very large. He's found recent success on Jarvan pretty much like every other LPL. Like, Jarvan's a huge pick for China. It always will be because of his team fight presence. And there's so much about team fighting, so Jarvan will always be a big pick. He tried Rengar. It's not a good Rengar, but he's a good jungler, and so it kind of skated by. His Lee Sin is absolutely disgusting. That is like cacao level Lee Sin. Do not let him have that champion. But he pretty much showed that he's still got it. So there's that there. Their new support is a challenger solo queue support known for his Thresh. His name is Cloud. He will be one of the best supports in LPL. Just give him time. Right now, his champion pool, I think, is a little bit too limited to Thresh, but his Thresh is, like, absolutely disgusting. Like, I would say the only Thresh that could probably get close to him is Zero's Thresh, but Cloud is a playmaker support. He's incredibly proficient. He has leaps and bounds over both Pomelo and Alan in that role, and it's really necessary because their AD carry, Emperor San, is a very weak-leaning AD carry. Like, he is heavily reliant on a support to create an infrastructure for him to thrive. So you need an incredibly strong support to carry San through the laning phase. San gets a lot of shit. A lot of people don't really consider him a top 80 carry as far as China, and I wouldn't put him in the top 3, but I think he's a little bit overlooked in his team fight presence. He plays a lot of Twitch, things like that. Again, the AD carry champion pools kind of overlap a lot, although Wei Xiao and UZI I think are much better Corki players than kind of the surrounding units, but otherwise, you know, it's Tristana, Kog'Maw. You know, when Twitch was really popular, he was being played a lot. Jinx has appeared a few times. Hyper carry-esque. Lucian. San actually plays a lot of Lucian, it's unfortunate too. But San, I think, is probably the weakest point of OMG, and that says something because I don't really think that San's a problem. Again, it's just the different mentality of he's not a big, true lane bully, but he does well in team fights. He knows how to position, he knows when to output his damage. Going, probably the most recognizable face of China. If you've seen this guy, his bone structure, it's pretty unique. He's got some nice cheekbones going on for him. Going is the Lord Flame of China. His Shyvana, his Gragas, his Maokai. He is the number 1v1 me in the top lane. I'm going to shit all over you, top laner of China. He is very smart. He knows how to use his teleport. He's a huge threat. Going and Cool are definitely kind of like the hard carries for the team. When he plays Mundo, it's terrifying, but that's the best way to talk about Going is he's the Lord Flame of China. As far as OMG as a team and in the context of LPL, OMG has always been the driving force of creativity and kind of skill in LPL, which was why it was a shame when they picked up Xiong for Cool being on the injury list, because their creativity and their evolution and their growth as a team pretty much went stagnant because they were trying to play to Xiong's kitty-sized champion pool. They pretty much stopped growing at all or experimenting with different things. Like this is a team that has done Braum jungle successfully. Like they do weird shit and they think about the game, and they've been like the driving force of LPL. It's like, oh, OMG is doing this, so we're going to adopt this strategy. And they've always been a very creative and very unique team. And when they stopped performing because of their mid laner, it pretty much hit LPL as a whole. They've returned to their roots a little bit, and when they're on point, this is a world-class team. Unfortunately, they've kind of stumbled in the back half of the split. I don't know if it's, again, they're working in secret on different things, if it's complacency, if they're just an incredibly cocky team, and if they don't respect their opponent, they just completely overlook them, or whatever it is, because they recently split 1-1 with World Elite Academy, the last place team. But when OMG is on point, and if they can show up to Worlds on point, I have no doubt that they can take games off of the Korean teams. Beat them? Again, no, but they have the potential and the roster to take games off of them. So the last team, wow, it's been going on for like 10 years. The last team is going to be World Elite Academy. So this is the sister team of World Elite. And they've also kind of recently had, oh, that's funny, Xie and XR. Okay, so this roster is actually kind of out of date. They recently had kind of like maybe it was 2 to 3 weeks ago, they had like a Hail Mary where they brought in these Korean players to kind of help bolster World Elite Academy, because, you know, what could it hurt? We're in last place anyway. They brought in Khan, and they brought in Mickey God, and what was Kong's name? I always get it wrong. I believe they're from Optimus Prime. Although I'm not a Korean specialist, so I could totally flunder that one. But they're Korean solo queues. Mickey God was brought in originally as the jungler. He then transferred over into the mid laner. Like, literally the mentality was, hey, this guy plays Lee Sin mid, or he's known for Lee Sin mid play. We should just put him in the jungle and it'll be the exact same thing. Did not work at all. So they had formerly Xie, which was known as an Annie mid player. They had Xie in the mid, they had Mickey God in the jungle. They decided to scratch that. So now it's Mickey God in the mid lane, and it's Soest or Love ANG in the jungle. Big Lee Sin player as well. He actually had a... World Elite Academy is like the team of hype. Like in LSPL, it was the mentality of win lane, win game. And they kind of carried that over into LPL, and they got kind of smashed. But in LSPL, they were like super hyped. It was, this is going to be the best team. World Elite Academy is actually better than World Elite. They kicked OMG out of G League. When they get into LPL, they're just going to monster through all of the teams. Like, there was so much hype surrounding them, particularly because of their AD carry, which is SMLZ. Is the Wei Xiao protege. He was pretty much handpicked by Wei Xiao to be his successor, so there's a lot of hype around him. The issue, though, is that it has not panned out. They had a lot of team drama right before they joined LPL. Their previous captain, his name was Ari. He was having girlfriend problems, and there's like this huge big public dispute like on their Wei Xiao, so you could like see it. Like, drama in China is very much more public and more exaggerated than drama in NA. Like, you think we have our drama with like Loco Doco and Reginald and things like that. Like, these guys post everything on Twitter, and you could like follow this live, and it's just like exploding into chaos, and there's so many more people, and it's just crazy. But they have this huge drama fest where their captain and the shot caller of the team, their support player Ari, left the team. And so they picked up a new support player and a new captain named Yushe, who I actually think is really good. He started to perform very well. Again, big Leona player, big Thresh player, Alistar, things like that. Especially next to SMLZ, because SMLZ is a good player, although he still has that solo queue mentality. And I think that's the #1 problem of World Elite Academy, is they have a solo queue mentality and a team game, and they kind of get... spanked by the team fighting powers of the more experienced teams, and unfortunately that's pretty much all you can say about them. They've struggled to find consistency. If they don't win the early lane phase, they pretty much completely fall off. But otherwise, their mechanical proficiency is still up there with, you know, any of the Chinese players. These are still really gifted players. There's not an issue of that. It's literally entirely an issue of macro. So, very last place team, although I definitely think that if you move them over into NA, they would not be a last place team. So that's the one thing I'll really give them. Their top laner is not XR, it's Khan, like I said, big Aurelia player. Again, more of a 1v1 mentality of hard carry. Soest is their jungler. And Xie is not on their team anymore. I believe he's still on the roster, though. I think he just got benched. But these are the 8 teams that represent LPL. The ones that we will most likely see at Worlds are going to be OMG, Starhorn Royal Club, and then there is a toss-up still between World Elite, EDG, and Invictus Gaming. Although LGG, if the stars align, they still have a chance of making it. But this is it. Again, if you don't watch Chinese League of Legends, the reasons why you should watch it. It is the most exciting League of Legends region to watch, simply for how explosive, how much team fighting there is, and the aptitude of the team fighting itself, and the mechanical ability of the players. Korea is incredibly entertaining to watch. Don't get me wrong, because it's on that much higher of a level as far as the mind games. You know, they're incredibly mechanically gifted as well. But China is just fun to watch. The things that they do, the picks that come out, it's crazy. The other big reason that you should be watching it is because we missed the rise of the Koreans to power. They kind of showed up at Worlds and they were suddenly, you know, like this big powerhouse, and then everyone started paying attention to them. China right now is going through their rise of power. Their meta and their ability and their playstyle is changing drastically. From their warding, from their pick span phase, from how they team fight, from their map pressure game. It's all rapidly expanding, you know, be that the Korean influx of players, the Korean influx of coaches, the fact that they're scrimming more with Koreans. I don't know what's going on right there, if it's just the perfect combination and hybrid of all of it, but we are witnessing a region rising to compete with the Koreans. Will they be able to do it this time around? I don't believe so. But it's starting to happen, and I think that in itself is incredibly exciting, and that there is much more that people can learn from China than they can learn from Korea right now. I kind of feel that Korea's pick ban phase is on such a different level that NA and EU have kind of almost learned as much as they can, and they need to start looking at different avenues and different threats to bring to their team composition, specifically how to properly team fight. No one team fights as well as the Chinese, not the Koreans. This is the best team fighting in the world, and I will stand by that.